From historic galleons long since broken up, whose spectral forms are still sighted burning across the high seas, to the phantom silhouettes of old privateer vessels crewed by skeletons and capable of moving over open ocean at unnatural speeds. Are you ready to brave our second list of picks for some of the most chilling ghost ships across the globe? Number 5. The HMS Eurydice. The HMS Eurydice was a 26-gun Royal Navy corvette that sank in 1878 in what is now considered one of Britain's worst peacetime naval disasters, and its ghostly form is now believed to haunt the seascape near Dunnos, a cape in Sandown Bay off the Isle of Wight in England. Historically, the first ship bearing this title was constructed in 1781 and served until she was broken up in 1834. Designed by Admiral the Honorable George Eliot, the second Eurydice was built as a speedy 26-gun frigate that excelled in shallows due to her limited draught. In 1843, the Eurydice would first see service on the North American and West Indies station under the command of Captain George Augustus Eliot, son of her designer, and she would remain in use until 1861, when she was converted into a stationary training vessel for a time. In 1877, the Eurydice was refitted at Portsmouth to be suited for training on the high seas. After her recommission, she would set off on another tour, but in 1878, upon her return voyage, would be hit by a violent snow and ice storm, in which she would be capsized and would sink. Out of the 319 on board, only 2 crew members would survive, and of those not sucked down with the ship, most were claimed by the freezing temperatures and exposure to icy waters. During the tragedy, it's documented that Captain Marcus Augustus Stanley Hare, a devout Christian, would give the order for every man on board to save himself, after which he would clasp his hands in prayer and go down with his ship. While the Eurydice was refloated later the same year, damages were so severe that efforts resulted in her breaking up and resinking. As an interesting side note, the Eurydice's position was quickly filled by a nearly identical ship, the HMS Juno, which strangely disappeared at sea in 1880, taking along with it 221 crew members. Into the present, a phantom Eurydice has been sighted often, skirting Sandown Bay near Dunnos. Possibly most famously, on October 17th of 1998, Prince Edward would report his own encounter off the Isle of Wight amidst filming the television series Crown and Country, and crew members claimed to have captured the Eurydice's image in several frames. Additionally, one Commander F. Lipscomb of the Royal Navy would later document having to make evasive maneuvers to avoid being hit by the ghostly vessel, only to watch it fade into nothingness. Number 4. The Teazer Light. The Teazer Light is believed to be the ghostly remnants of a United States privateer schooner that earned its reputation after capturing no less than 12 British vessels, 5 of which made it to American ports, and is sadly recognized for the explosive manner in which it went out, many believe resulting in its burning spectral image materializing each June off the coast of Mahone Bay in Nova Scotia, Canada. Historically, the young Teazer was constructed in 1813 and was intended to replace the earlier privateer vessel, the Teazer, that had been captured and set ablaze by British forces. Frederick Johnson, the Teazer's rogue captain, was paroled on the terms he never act against the British again, but rather than heed these orders, would enlist as first lieutenant of the newly fashioned young Teazer on her very first voyage. The young Teazer was a licensed pirate vessel that hunted the coasts of Nova Scotia, and through the War of 1812, she would prey on British merchant ships, reclaiming them for prize money. While the young Teazer had a successful first bout, she wasn't so lucky on her second voyage, and was stalked by British vessels, who cornered her in Mahone Bay. On June 27th of 1813, in full knowledge their soon-to-be fates would be the gallows, Lieutenant Johnson would grab a burning coal and charge headfirst into the gunpowder stores, obliterating the schooner and killing 30 of the 38 men aboard, while leaving remaining survivors badly burned and in need of rescue. What salvage would be collected from the wreck would be used in construction around the bay, and pieces of the old gal can be seen today in the Rope Loft restaurant and in the wooden cross inside St. Stephen's Anglican Church, both in Chester, while several scorched portions of the ship are also held for viewing at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic in Halifax. According to local legend, each year the glow from a burning ship bearing a likeness to the young Teazer, called the Teazer Light, can be sighted in Mahoney Bay, right near the site of her destruction, and interestingly, usually right around June 27th. Some versions of this legend tell the ship also appears during heavy fogs, or within 3 days of full moons. Some of the first recorded encounters with the Teazer Light were documented in the late 19th century, with the phenomenon being so common that several have attempted to debunk it as a trick of light or some form of optical illusion, though all such attempts have been met in failure. Number 3. The Eliza Battle. The Eliza Battle was a Tombigbee River steamboat that operated between Columbus, Mississippi and Mobile, Alabama, in the United States. That's destruction is considered the largest maritime disaster in the whole of the river and region's history. Historically, the Eliza Battle was first launched in New Albany, Indiana, in 1852. As a wooden side-wheeled paddle steamer, she sat at 316 tons, was based out of Mobile by the firm Cox, Brainerd and Company, and was considered one of the most luxurious riverboats of the era, even accommodating former President Millard Fillmore during a reception in Mobile on April 7th of 1854. Towards the end of February in 1858, the Eliza Battle departed Columbus, captained by S. Graham Stone, piloted by Daniel Epps, and loaded to the brim with passengers and more than 1,200 bales of cotton. On March 1st, at around 2 a.m., still 32 miles downriver from Demopolis, right near Beckley's Landing, cotton ferried by the ship caught fire, with strong winter winds fanning the blaze until it was out of control. As the crew attempted to quell the situation, the vessel continued downstream without anyone at the wheel, and since lifeboats were unable to close in due to the heat of the flames, most passengers were forced into the river's icy waters in naught but their pajamas, with some attempting to float on cotton bales, and others climbing into the treetops along the sides of the floe. The Eliza Battle would eventually come to rest above Kemp's Landing, near the present-day Alabama State Route 114 bridge at Pennington, with survivors rescued by the steamer Magnolia, accompanied by local residents' efforts. When all was said and done, the accident resulted in the deaths of 33 out of the 105 on board. The ship would sink to the bottom of the Tombigbee, where it remains to this day, covered over by around 28 feet of water. This tragedy solidified Eliza Battle into Alabama folklore, and since the date of its wreck, a number of reports have emerged from the surrounding area, detailing encounters with or sightings of its ghostly form, sometimes on fire just north of Pennington, downriver to Nunnafalia. Some tell the spectral vessel appears most often around the anniversary of its sinking, others on cold and windy nights regardless of date, and always around the same location at which the disaster occurred. Some weathered rivermen tell that sightings of the Eliza Battle can act as omens of impending disaster, while others that they could signify ill tidings for ships traveling the same route. Number 2. The Baie Chaleur Fireship. More frequently called the Chaleur Phantom, or more simply the Phantom Ship, the Baie Chaleur Fireship is a ghost light that's been spied off Chaleur Bay in New Brunswick, Canada, a phenomenon that's been experienced over 100 miles of coastline. And while a number of theories as to what the phantom glow might be caused by have been made, to date, no one can be certain. The Fireship, which is said to appear as a flaming three-masted galleon, not dissimilar to the galleon on New Brunswick's provincial flag, is surrounded by a number of legends. One tells that in 1501, a Portuguese captain traveled to Heron Island in Baie de Chaleur to capture Micmac for slave trade, and that on his second voyage, locals became wise to his ways, hunted him down, and tortured and killed him. A year later, it's said that the captain's brother went searching for him and was also attacked by native residents while still aboard his vessel, after which his ship caught fire and his crew was forced to jump into the water, but not before swearing they'd haunt the bay for 1,000 years. This sea tale furthers to tell that bodies of victims from the fight, both Portuguese and Micmac, would later wash up on shore and were buried in shallow graves at French Woods on the western tip of the island. A second legend tells that a group of pirates killed a woman in the area, and that with her dying words, she cast a curse upon them, uttering, "For as long as this world is, may you burn on the Baie." A final legend tells that sailors traveling the region hit bad weather, panicked, and blamed one of their crew members for their misfortune, resulting in the poor man's execution at sea. Their ship would later catch fire, and it was decided that it was the man's Catholic blood reaping its vengeance. Regardless of which story, if any, might hold water, an otherworldly light has been spied in Chaleur Bay time and time again, and while theories involving rotting vegetation, undersea gases, and St. Elmo's fire have been formed, to date, no explanation has been confirmed. In several eyewitness reports from early Heron Island settlers, most notably the Pettigrew family, the spectral ship was most often encountered on the northern end of the spit, and usually under full moons. In 1878, Mrs. Pettigrew would document an incident in which she was on her veranda after dusk on a warm summer's eve when the manifestation of a sailor appeared at her farmhouse and begged for help tending his burns. Frightened, she turned to run inside, but the figure shot past her at an unnatural speed, and at this point she realized he had no legs and was floating. To date, many have cited and continue to report sightings of the ghostly Fireship, with some residents having encountered it hundreds of times, sometimes as a burning ship, at others as a ball of fire, and at others still as an odd orb of light like a ship's lantern. And in a handful of instances, witnesses have spied the silhouettes of men aboard, climbing up the rigging in attempts to escape the blaze on deck. Number 1. The SS Valencia. The SS Valencia was an iron-hulled passenger steamer built for use on the Red D Line, which stretched as a link between Venezuela and New York City, whose wreckage is considered by some as the worst maritime disaster to touch the graveyard of the Pacific, an infamously treacherous region located southwest of Vancouver Island. Historically, the vessel was constructed in 1882 by William Cramp and Sons, 1 year following the construction of the Caracas, its sister ship. In 1897, the Valencia was ambushed off Guantanamo Bay in Cuba by the Spanish cruiser Reina Mercedes. The following year, it would be converted into a coastal passenger liner purposed to operate off the United States' west coast, and for a time, it was even utilized as a troop ship in the Spanish-American War. On January 20th in 1906, the Valencia set off from San Francisco, California towards Seattle, Washington, carrying 9 officers, 56 crew members, and around 108 passengers. Through the early hours of January 1st, right off of Cape Mendocino, weather would begin to worsen, drastically reducing visibility while encircling the vessel in violent gales. At around midnight of the 22nd, the Valencia struck a reef 11 miles out from Cape Beale on the southwestern corner of Vancouver Island, and immediately after impact was struck by a massive wave that lifted the boat and allowed for water to begin its breach. In attempts to prevent further damage or injury, the captain ordered the Valencia ran aground, and it would come to rest all but 100 yards from the shoreline. But lifeboat drills had been neglected, and the crew, not knowing how to properly lower them, destroyed a handful, capsized a couple more, and lost one entirely. Help finally arrived on the morning of January 24th in the form of locals from shore, but was prevented from reaching the ship by the area's persistent bad weather. Eventually, remaining passengers took to climbing and desperately clinging to the exposed portions of the ship, but sadly, the Valencia would break apart and was washed out to sea, leaving those still living to drown, die of hypothermia, or to be beaten to death against the point's sharp rocks. When it was over, the incident resulted in an estimated death toll of around 136 people. Some claim more, with only 37 men surviving, and every single woman and child aboard perishing in the cold. Strangely, while transporting the few survivors recovered to Seattle, the vessel, City of Topeka, stopped en route to relay news of the tragedy to a passing ship. Suddenly, awes and gasps swept the decks, and it was documented that a number of those present observed the exact shape of the Valencia, formed out of the exhaust from the City of Topeka's funnel. Additionally, it's claimed a ship passed the City of Topeka as it entered the port, and to their astonishment, it was the Valencia, crewed by skeletons. The Valencia's theatrical demise, coupled with these early claims, has earned it a place in a number of ghost stories and sea fables. And only 6 months after its sinking, a local fisherman would spy one of its lifeboats, possibly the missing one, loaded with skeletons stripped bare, stuck in a whirlpool within a cave along the shoreline of Baie. While it's generally accepted this lifeboat was from the Valencia and became trapped in the flurry following the wreck, due to its hazardous location within the cave, it was never recovered and was eventually lost once again. And ever since, several have reported sighting a phantom lifeboat in the waters near, crewed by rows of skeletons. In 1910, a story surrounding a group of sailors and their encounter with the ghostly Valencia was reported on in the Seattle Times, in which they spied a phantom vessel bearing her likeness right near Pachina Point, off Vancouver Island, with waves washing over her frame and spectral humanoid figures clinging to the rigging for their lives. Up into the present, this same scene has been encountered by numerous reputable sources, and many claim that during foggy weather, one can still hear the voices of the women and children of the Valencia, eerily singing the hymn, "Nearer My God to Thee," as they seemingly relive their untimely fates into eternity. Thanks for joining us for our second list of infamous ghost ships around the world. If you enjoyed hearing our histories and ghost stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn notifications on. Throw us a like, and most importantly, share us with anyone you feel could use a good scare. Good night.